You're listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
Welcome to Shorts,
the part of the show where we regularly interrupt your scheduled programming to bring you content of relative interest.
Thanks for listening.
Oh yeah, we're coming back. Oh yeah, okay, you're here. You're alive. You know what's going on. We're back with the Ana Vivo podcast, and today we're going to be doing something that I find quite interesting.
I'm the map.
Okay.
I'm the map. I'm the map.
Yes, that is exactly what we're talking about today, is the topic of maps.
Dora the Explorer.
Not Dora the Explorer, but that was a interesting song. If you've ever heard of Brian Regan, shout out to him as a comedian. He does a great question, a bit on how that person got their job, like showing up late for work one day at the Dora the Explorer headquarters, and his whole job was to come up with a theme song for the maps, and then showed up late and was like, I'm the map? I'm the map? And so just started repeating that. And that's basically the song. Today, we're going to be talking about different kinds of maps, map projections, the creation, cartography as a passion, as creation and topic, and discussing the best map projection. So if you are here in my studio, you will count, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can count 10 maps. There's another one over there, 11 maps. A globe, a little globe in here. So 12 maps, I guess. 11 maps and a globe for now. And that's just a cursory glance around the home office. I've been told that men typically have maps on their walls. I don't know why that is, but I know it's true for me, and I love maps. What's interesting about my maps is that this is what you wanted to listen to today. Welcome to the Ana Vivo podcast, another episode by Tim C. Miller. And today we're going to learn about what's interesting about Tim's maps. What's interesting about my maps today is that they are in various flavors. So for instance, one of them is a whiteboard that you can write on, which is pretty cool. And it's also magnetic, so you can stick things to it. The other one is a scratch-off one. The other one is an old one made out of butcher paper and rubbed with coffee grounds and burnt to make it look like an old style map. So all sorts of different flavors. And they also happen to be, a couple of them are different projections. So some of the more popular map projections are, and you've learned about these in school probably, the Mercator projection, the cylindrical projection, the Winkle triple projection, the azimuthal projection, the conic projection, the Robinson projection, and the equal area projection. If you go online, there's some really cool websites that you can find that allow you to move countries over top of other countries and get their exact actual visual representation. So most of the maps we have today in the Western world and what we have on the walls teach kids, for instance, that Africa is just this behemoth of a country, or Greenland
No,
is
most
continent.
of the maps show Africa itty bitty.
Oh,
compared
maybe
to
not
Russia.
that map that I'm looking at.
Your map shows Africa pretty good.
That one, yeah, that's a different projection. So the one, yeah, you're right. This one over here,
Most of them are.
that was big, but
I mean,
yeah.
Africa should be way, 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 way bigger than Russia, right?
Yeah, or South America or Greenland looks massive.
You actually have some really good maps here.
Yeah, thank you. You're like looking around like, wait a second, these all look normal. Yeah, as they should. So, but we're taught in our Western society that Alaska is a floating island down by Hawaii. You know, that's most American maps. Most American maps are we're a capitalist country, and so our producers of maps find ways to cut costs and sell products as cheaply as possible. So instead of making a map of the United States that shows where Alaska is in relation to the world, they just cut Alaska off from British Columbia and attach it into the water next to Hawaii. And you grew up thinking that Alaska is an island floating off the coast and somehow covered in snow and yet in the same tropics as Hawaii. Or that Greenland is a massive place, or that Russia extends across the entire northern hemisphere, you know, over all of these places, or that India is this tiny little thumbnail that sticks out in the water. And so anyway, these websites, you can go on these websites and click on a country or a continent and drag it over another continent or country, and it will reposition it based on its actual square mileage or kilometers, and give you an honest, truthful representation of the size of Texas. And I love the threads that I read between Europeans and Americans who are like, they're hilarious because it shows this bias, this geographic bias so well, where the Europeans are like, why is it so expensive to fly from Florida to Texas? I don't understand. We have Ryanair, and I can get to 4 other countries in Europe for the same price it costs to fly from Florida to Texas. And then someone from America will pipe up on the thread and say, well, look at Texas and overlay Texas, just the state, on the entire European Union and see how far that is. It's because it's the size of one state is the size of your entire continent or whatever, you know. So there's just these inherent geographic biases. And so what I love, what I really enjoy, one of my hobbies is finding unique maps that do a great job of depicting accurate representations of the world that we live in. And to sum it all up, the problem is we live on a ball in a sphere. And
prove it.
Okay, separate episode. Next week's episode. Start researching that one right now. The problem is we live on a ball, and to depict a 3D image in a 2D picture that sits on your wall is going to inherently have some sort of bias in the projection error that a printer or a measurement will create. And so cartographers do their absolute best to show sizes, or if you look on some maps, you'll see the longitude and latitude lines are really close together on the north and south poles, but they're really spread out in massive cubes, you know, towards the equator. And it makes it look like you're looking at a sphere, but it's helping project those countries a little better. They do their best. But what I want to know, and what I'm always searching for, is the best, most accurate projection of a map that's not a globe. Okay, I don't want a globe. I want an actual comparison here.
So the most accurate map you can get, because when you take a globe, a 3-dimensional object, and you slice it down to 2 dimensions.
Right, as we discussed.
There are 3 options that you can have. You can either distort the size of each country.
Okay.
Which is what normally we see, which is why we're like, wow.
Yeah, that's the capitalistic way we throw it up on the wall in the elementary school.
Yeah,
and
look
they're just
how
distorted
big
images.
we are compared to whatever.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Real quick on that, they're Western focused, and there's 2 main projections: an Atlantic focused map, which is 99% of all the maps in the world, and a Pacific centered map, which is very, very rare and hard to find. And the reason for that is because most maps are created for Westerners by Westerners and for Westerners. And so we focus all of our maps with the Atlantic Ocean in the center, and we put the Pacific Ocean. This is one of my, I'm going to go on a rabbit hole. I'm sorry, I can't stand this. This is the worst bias in all the maps in all the world, and the most ridiculous thing. If you slide your map over, if it could turn, the Pacific Ocean is massive. It's incredible how huge it is. And yet we relegate, we leave the poor ocean off to the corners of these maps.
And most of the islands are in the Pacific.
And all of beautiful
what do we have
Pacific Ocean
in the Atlantic?
Islands are
Bermuda?
Right. The triangle, the deadly triangle. Right. So all of life, all of Finding Nemo, all of the world's most prolific animal life, and all of Micronesia and the islands and everything are all centered in the Pacific Ocean. And if you could see a Pacific Ocean centered map, you'd be like, oh my gosh, how big is that? And then you would realize why it was so incredible that so many years ago, people came from Asia to the South Americas or vice versa, or because of just how treacherous and massive this ocean is. But most of our maps, 90% of them, are created for Westerners, by Westerners.
Most of the people that came from Asia to South America and North America came through the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. And so we have this
Because
Atlantic
it's shorter.
Ocean because it's shorter. And so we have this Atlantic Ocean
It went under
focused
Africa
map. Yep. And it's
Or-
just so small
to get to
in comparison.
Yeah, as opposed to being like, well, it looks like you're right there.
Right. And so if you look on the edges of most maps, you'll see the Pacific Ocean. You're like, oh, that doesn't look big at all. Yeah, well, they're doing a horrible job of showing you how big it is because they're just cutting it off in the frame of your picture. So anyway, back to your point.
Yeah, so they can either
they can distort the images to try to fit it all on. Yep. Or
of the countries,
Mhm.
or they can distort the shape of them, and so they get stretched or scrunched.
Yep.
Not necessarily
Scrunching happens a lot.
right, or bent, or even curved. Or they can distort the distance between the stuff. Whereas, like this map, you're saying the Pacific Ocean is so
Right.
massive, they're distorting the distance of what it actually is.
Right.
So yeah, that's the three ways that you, no matter how you do it, you got to you got to distort distance, shape, or size.
Yeah. And to that point, there's a few other distortions that are nuanced in there. One of them being the relative distance between the countries. And so they'll do one, for instance, most schools will have a colorful map, and what its focus is geopolitics. And so it'll break it up in colors by countries, and they're not so much concerned with the relative distance between those countries and each other. And so the scrunching or the distortion will happen typically in the ocean or in between places like the Mediterranean or rivers or things like that. And so the countries will look like they're a lot closer than they actually are, or even a lot farther than they are. For instance, again, back to the Atlantic focus maps, you'll see Hawaii way off, distorted, way off in the middle of nowhere, or Guam way off in the middle of nowhere. And if you actually did not have that distortion, you would see how much closer they are to. They are still in the middle of nowhere, but they're a lot closer than what the maps make it look like. And so that's one distortion is the relative distance between the countries, or some maps people like from an aesthetic point of view are the physical relief maps. And so they'll have a lot of the mountain ranges, topography, some of the drier climates. They'll typically be shaded between green and yellows, and show you some really neat aesthetics of the world's climate. And again, those will be biased in that you don't get to see really the projections of country sizes per se, although they are often still in there. But the distances or even the lengths of things, such as the massive Sahara Desert, are not as well established, or they're to the extreme. If you step back on some of those maps, you'll see this massive band of yellow and dryness that you just assume is like total desert, and that's not what it's saying at all. In reality, that's the equator. It's just warmer there, but it makes the viewer think that it's just all hot and deserty and massive, and it's not really. So so I'm on the hunt, as Sherlock Holmes would say, for a map that is not a globe, that is an accurate display,
The watermelon map.
an accurate display of countries and continents and their size, and specifically a geopolitical map. So I want the boundaries, the recognized geographic boundaries of countries in there, and I want them to be as accurate in size as possible. And here's the catcher, I want it to be Pacific Ocean centered. I would challenge you, dear listener, to just even find a map of the world at all that is Pacific centered focused. You can online, you can find some images of it, but they are so hard to actually find a map that you can buy and have shipped to your house that's of any decency and accurate. They're so hard to buy.
They call them Oceania maps.
Oceania focus maps.
Oceania focus maps. Yep, would be
The Google search term.
Yep.
Yeah, they're incredibly hard to find. And so if I could find one that's geopolitical based, that is Oceania focused or Pacific Ocean focused, and that is accurate in its display of country size, man, that would be a dream come true. So that is a little bit of our episode today on maps in general. Also, if anybody has any ideas on why men like maps, obviously women like maps too, but men seem to have them in their offices or their wherever they store their stuff a lot. Maybe it's because we just live outside the home, and I don't know. There's like the world to conquer. Who knows? So
just to go back on how distorted maps are.
yeah, right.
you can look at almost any map you have and look at Greenland.
Right. That's what I was saying at the beginning. Greenland. How big, reader, listener? How big do you think Greenland is compared to
800,000 square miles.
America?
3.7 million square miles.
And yet on most maps, Greenland is the size of the country of America.
Or bigger in some of them.
Talk about distortion, people.
Yes.
Yeah, look at the longitude and latitude lines on that map. See how they're massive squares the further you go out, but if you go down near the north or south, they get tinier or
Yeah.
narrow. So it causes this distortion that should be wrong. I mean, outlawed, honestly.
Well, it is because you're seeing more of it because it's on that curve, as opposed to here, you're on the flat side of it. You're looking at the globe.
Right.
Right on the side
Obviously,
of it.
they're trying to project this 3D image and spread it out onto a 2D image. And so again,
In reality, they should just get rid of Antarctica and Greenland and say, not important.
not important. What we should all be using at this point are hologram maps that you can just spin and use, like ArcGIS, but on a hologram that you can display.
I hate that you just said that. ArcGIS, ArcGIS.
Yeah, that's what it's called, and that's one of my favorite tools. They do have obviously enterprise versions of that for mappers, cartographers, people that enjoy that kind of stuff. But ArcGIS is just a fantastic tool and company that folks can use to explore the world. I think that's where we want to end it.
Yeah. So, you were asking if anyone can find the most accurate. You said geopolitical, whatever, from the Pacific Ocean. I don't know about that, but the most accurate map you can find is known as the watermelon map.
That's the one where they take the globe and they basically just split it in three, up and down. Okay.
And so you get a lot of white space.
Yeah.
But
But it is accurate. That's true.
Yep.
It's not pretty.
Not pretty at all.
But that's what you get.
And
you sacrifice
the
accuracy
countries
for
are
pretty.
rotated because as you're looking at your normal map, all the countries are facing nicely up and down.
From left to right.
From left to right.
That's a
Everything's
distortion
up
we didn't
and
talk
down.
about.
Yep. Whereas in reality, the top of North America should be butting up to the top of Asia, right?
Yeah.
And so we should be flipped around like that and stuff. And so
Right.
you look at the watermelon map and It's literally just a globe sliced up
Yeah.
and
And
splayed
pasted
out.
on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's another important bias is all of our maps, most of our maps are read from left to right. Again, made for Westerners by Westerners, read from left to right and oriented north to south and west to east. And so you have, it doesn't help people learn. It doesn't help kids learn that the northern hemisphere of Australia is not the same as the northern hemisphere of America. You say northern hemisphere, we're automatically in our minds thinking, ooh, cold, cold Minnesota, northern hemisphere. No, that's the northern hemisphere of Australia is closer to the equator than the southern hemisphere because it's under the equator. So it's hotter up there. And you go to the southern hemisphere of Australia, which to us would be nice and warm, and it's freezing to death. So, it doesn't do justice for these maps that are splayed out from left to right. Every country is oriented north to south and easy for us to look and read because we don't get an idea of where these actually are in the world. So maybe that's the answer right there. We just need to do away with maps and everybody needs to go back to globes.
Get little keychain globes. Yeah.
Globes that we can just say, oh yeah, Australia is under the equator. We're above the equator.
And Antarctica
it's
is
over here.
Not that big.
Antarctica is tiny as opposed to taking up the massive bottom of your map. And so it's just, it's hilarious, the distortion.
It is interesting to think about the very first people who were like, people come to the new world, they discover the new world, the options that they have to now choose. How should I map this? Should I map it
you can look at
watermelon way, or should I map it papaya way, or should I map it?
I don't have one of those. I've got a watch in the other room that's an old world map on the watch face. And it is that if you look at it, you're like, where even am I? And then you realize it's Manhattan and New York before it was New York. But it's like upside down because it's how you would have approached it on a boat. Okay, Manhattan's sticking out this way. I'm approaching it this way. I'm drawing it. So the orientation is like upside down and just, drawn to scale. And you're like, this doesn't make sense. And then if you flip it on like Google Earth, you're like, oh, it's Manhattan because they orient it north to south, And so it is funny when you're drawing it from different perspectives versus us now with our technology to be able to just look straight down and cut these up in different ways. So,
yes, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
And so a little piece of trivia here: the old sailor days, we would talk about sailing the 7 seas. And if you look on a modern map, you're like, can anybody? Here's a challenge for my listeners: can anybody pick out?
They're labeled
the 7 seas. Without using labels and kind of guessing, because on a modern map, it all is connected. Everything's connected. But if you looked on a globe or if you looked on a nautical chart, which would be ocean focused, all of the land is actually so much closer together than it looks on these freaking maps. And so it looks like actual distinguishable separate bodies of water with little channels in between. Okay, how far do you think the tip of South America is to Antarctica? On a map, it looks huge. It looks like you could pass, I don't know, what would I say, 3 magnets through from the tip to Antarctica there.
I love, just to point out here, your magnets are tiny little maps.
Yeah, that's true. My magnets on my map are magnets of little maps. Oh, actually, one of those magnets may be the old world. Maybe an old world map. This one?
This one right here.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just totally drawn as if you would have arrived to these places. Anyway, the point is, if you were to look at actual real maps splayed out and nautical maps, they look like 7 bodies of actual oceans and with little channels in between. And so you would say, we're going to go sail. What sailor has sailed all 7 seas? That's a sailor of experience, a sailor who's been around the world, a sailor who's, kind of seen it all and stuff like that. But nowadays it's like, it's all one ocean. No, it's not. They're separate oceans.
Well,
you can't tell that on the map.
I mean, on the map, they're separate oceans, but in reality,
No, on these maps, they're labeled that way because of geopolitical claim. The Indian Ocean, the South China Sea. So, but if you actually look on a accurate map, you can tell that there's actual separate. I mean, they look like separate bodies of water because of how enclosed the whole Indian Ocean is. If you were to take Australia there and the South Cape Horn off of South Africa there, and bring it down actually a lot closer to Antarctica and kind of tie all of that in together, that looks like it would be one big body of water, the Indian Ocean. And so it looks like its own ocean. But on this map, it's splayed out so far because of the distortion, it makes it look like it's just one big passable thing.
I see.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyway. Well, this has been a great session on one of my hobbies and interests, and I'm always in search. So if you're ever come across an old antique store or a modern cartographer who's able to generate a Pacific-focused or what did you say? Oceanic-focused map that is also geopolitical based and as accurate as possible, I would be in great interest of something like that to display as a comparison model to all of my Atlantic-focused and distorted maps.
But get yourself a globe.
Yeah, maybe we just do that. End of story. Everybody go back to globes.
Get a globe.
Yes, that is it. All right, well, as your nephews would say.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Ana Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.